In the quiet of their home, amidst the familiar scent of dinner wafting through the air, an unspoken tension hung between them. Brandon sat, his mind echoing with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. He pondered how he and Sally, his wife, had arrived at this moment. Over 2 decades of marriage, 2 fantastic college-age kids, and a charming old house, a gift from Sally's grandmother, formed the backbone of their life together. They'd put their hearts into renovating the house, adding a pool and a detached garage, transforming it into a modern haven with an open layout and a stunning kitchen. He felt a swell of pride, believing their home could easily rival those featured on HGTV. Their beach house in Hatteras, NC, held a special place in his heart. He resisted altering it, wanting to preserve the nostalgia of his childhood memories spent there. It was a treasure trove of family moments. Brandon Baker had ascended to the role of Senior Vice President at Central Logistics, reaping the rewards of years of dedication. Meanwhile, Sally Baker was flourishing in her career as a Senior Accounts Manager at Rivera & Son, where she'd spent 2 decades honing her skills. Their life seemed idyllic, a perfect home, nearly perfect children, successful careers, and a happy marriage. Until he'd been nodding and saying, "I understand a lot," but deep down, he knew he didn't grasp what was happening in his life. Suddenly, he realized Sally had fallen silent, her gaze fixed on him. "Do you really understand what I'm trying to say?" she asked. "I understand," he replied, hoping she hadn't noticed the tally marks on the sheet of paper in front of him. 32 marks. 32 times he had said, "I understand," to his wife in the past 2 days. It was time to end this debate. "So we finally agree," Sally said. "I'm going to go outside our marriage one time to experience." She stopped as she saw Brandon shaking his head. Brandon met Sally's gaze and said firmly, "I would never cheat on you, and I will not agree to you cheating on me." "I have never cheated on you," Sally protested. Brandon continued, "I am willing to forgive you for the cheating you have done up to this point. But it stops now." "I have never cheated on you," Sally insisted. "Yes, you have, at least in my mind. And if you're honest in your mind, you have. You have had several lunches alone with him. He has met you several times at your girls' night out and turned those evenings into de facto dates. You have carried on an extensive texting conversation with him, especially on the weekends." Brandon paused and locked eyes with her, causing Sally to lower her head. "And now he has a reservation for an upscale room at the Jefferson Hotel and 2 reservations for their Sunday brunch. His intentions are obvious. You have a daring new dress hidden in the back of your closet, a bag from Victoria's Secret filled with new lingerie. I assume for his eyes only, since you have hidden it from me. Your intentions are also obvious." Brandon stopped and waited for a reply, but none came. He said, "Let's make this simple. I want to be clear about what's going to happen. I'm giving you 2 options for this Saturday morning. Option 1, I'm heading to the beach house. I'll stop by the Virginia Diner for breakfast, then head to the beach. I'd really like you to come with me. We can spend the weekend addressing our issues and seeing if we can salvage our marriage. It would be nice if you returned the lingerie you bought for him and got something for us to enjoy together." Brandon paused, trying to gauge Sally's reaction. Once, he could read her easily, but now he struggled. "Your other option is to stick with your plans for Saturday. Go meet Stephen Martinez at the Jefferson Hotel, have a romantic dinner at Bookbinder's restaurant, dance at the Tobacco Company Club, and then return to the Jefferson to continue your affair." "I need you to look at me," Brandon told Sally. Slowly, she lifted her head. "You can go ahead with your plans. You don't need my permission. But the moment I drive away from our driveway on Saturday morning without you, our marriage is over." Sally looked at Brandon, dumbfounded. How did he know about their weekend plans? She started to speak slowly. Before Sally could say a word, Brandon interjected, "Just so you know, I have acquaintances at your workplace. You've got allies there who are worried about you. And as for Stephen Martinez, well, he doesn't have any real friends at all." Sally took a moment to process what Brandon had said. Then she tried to take the offensive. I've been a faithful wife and partner to you for 22 years. But Brandon cut her off. No, you were faithful for 21 years and 10 months. You've been seeing Stephen Martins behind my back since your first lunch with him, Brandon stated. I've never cheated on you, Sally pleaded. You've done more than just exchange kisses with him, Brandon started to say. Sally stood up, interrupting him this time. I've never cheated on you. With a sadness that took Sally by surprise, Brandon continued, Yes, it is. I saw it in your eyes, in the very eyes that met mine. The eyes that are now closed, the face that turns away from me in bed. How many times have you mentally been with him when we were together, alone together? Sally felt her carefully laid plans unraveling before her. She tried to regain control of the conversation. Brandon, we have a strong marriage. I cherish our relationship and your love above all else. We've raised 2 amazing children, built successful careers, and if we stay on track, we can retire early and truly enjoy life together. I've been faithful to you, and I'm ready to be your loving wife for the rest of our days. I just need 1 day for myself, and 1 night for him, Brandon retorted sharply. Sally sighed, lowering her gaze before meeting Brandon's eyes again. Brandon's response was swift. I do understand, but you've been lying and sneaking around for months. You've gone on girls' nights out that were actually dates with him. You've had intimate lunches, holding hands and letting him touch you in ways only I should. And worst of all, you've brought him into our bedroom, replacing me with thoughts of him. You've let him intrude on our time with countless messages, not to mention the nature of your conversations. Sally, I have knowledge about everything, and how I acquired it isn't important. What matters is that you grasp what I'm telling you. Do you understand? Brandon's tone was firm. Sally's gaze met his, but it was clouded with confusion. He sighed quietly, realizing she didn't comprehend the gravity of her actions. With a heavy heart, Brandon stood and left the room. He retreated to their bedroom, mechanically went through his nighttime routine, but the prospect of sleep seemed distant. Meanwhile, Sally remained motionless for a few minutes before finally sinking onto the couch. She grabbed her phone and dialed Monica. Brandon knows everything. About Stephen and our plans for the weekend, Sally confessed as Monica answered. Monica's response was immediate concern. That doesn't sound good. Are you going to call it off? Sally's voice was barely audible. I don't know how I can. I've promised Stephen, and he's invested so much for this weekend. Monica pressed, reminding her of the promises she made to Brandon. You make commitments to Brandon too, remember? I was your maid of honor. Martinez can cancel everything without a cost, and cheating on Brandon isn't a good reason. Monica countered. I'm not cheating on Brandon, Sally reiterated, her voice trembling. Yes, you are, Monica countered. When I told you about what Arthur and I did, I made sure you understood that it was with his consent. We chose someone we'd never see again. We did everything right, and we're still working through issues. Monica pleaded. Please reconsider. Forget this plan, stop seeing Stephen, and apologize to Brandon. Sally softly replied. But I need this. I need to experience another man just once more. Stephen's a good guy, and the women at work say he's good. A good guy wouldn't sleep with a married woman, Monica declared. Think about what you're risking just to be another conquest for him. I won't be just another conquest. He cares for me, Sally insisted. Monica wanted to shout, Don't you see? That's even worse. I've met Stephen at our girls' night out. He's good-looking, but he's nowhere near the man Brandon is. Don't you understand? I do, Sally whispered. Monica urged, Please take your time with this decision. It's going to shape your life, and the lives of those you care about for years to come. Sally sighed quietly. I thought you'd get it. I thought you, of all people, would understand why I have to do this. Making one final attempt to reach her friend, Monica said, Sally, it's not that I don't understand. It's not that Brandon doesn't understand. It's not about whether you're kids. Your parents or your friends will understand. It's that you don't understand. I'm pleading with you. Don't go through with this." Sally replied firmly. "Well, Brandon knows everything I've done so far, and he hasn't stopped me. He might not like it, but he'll let me do this. He'll understand how much it means to me. I'm going to let you go now. I need some rest." Ending the call, Monica turned to her husband, Arthur. She didn't grasp any of what I said. I regret telling her about our experience. Arthur sighed. We agreed to keep it between us, didn't we? Monica reached out to Arthur. I needed to talk to someone about the problems we were facing. I never thought it would give her ideas. Arthur embraced Monica and replied, "I understand, and I'm not upset. I have to admit, I discussed our issues with Brandon too." Monica dropped her head, a shadow of shame crossing her face. "You told Brandon." I can only imagine how he reacted. Did he suggest kicking me to the curb or branding my forehead with a capital A? Arthur reassured her. "You know Brandon better than that." He asked me a series of questions that really made me reflect on us. After answering, he told me something crucial. "You two entered into this together, made this decision together. It may have been a big mistake, but only you two can fix it. As long as we stay together and work on our relationship, everything will work out." He made me realize that we're in this together, trying to fix things. He might be the reason we're still married. Monica began to cry softly, murmuring, "He might be the reason we're still married, and we might be the reason he's divorced." Arthur held her tighter, shaking his head. "Don't blame yourself if they split up. Brandon's right. If they don't work through it together, they don't stand a chance." Sally slipped into bed, noticing that Brandon was still awake. He turned away from her, and they both shifted to opposite sides of the bed. Despite being only 2 feet apart, the distance felt immeasurable, as if they were miles apart. When the alarm clock went off, they rose and went through their morning routine in silence. After Sally left for work, Brandon took a moment to relax and check the list he held in his hands. He had decided to take today and Monday off from work. Brandon walked through each room of the house, photographing its contents and making notes. He planned to empty the man cave, a room Sally disliked anyway. He transferred their wedding and family photos from the cloud to a thumb drive, leaving their wedding album on the coffee table, unable to bring himself to open it. Although the apartments he had seen were nice, he knew he would miss this house. He would cherish the memories but would miss being here, and he would miss the woman he still loved and the life they had built together. Brandon drove to his appointment with Lauren Taylor, who King highly recommended. The settlement she proposed was straightforward. Sally would get the house and her retirement plan in 401, while Brandon would keep the beach house and his retirement plan. They would pay off her car and credit cards. Part of their investment accounts would be set aside for college tuition, and each child would receive $10,000 as a fund. Then they would split the remaining funds evenly. After reviewing the settlement proposal, Brandon simply nodded. Lauren Taylor suggested serving Sally on Wednesday morning. Brandon nodded again, stood up, shook her hand, and left the office. Lauren Taylor realized that her client had spoken very little since retaining her for his divorce. All communication had been through email, and she sensed his sadness and resignation. Sometimes she questioned why she had chosen family law as her specialty. Brandon went to the bank and established a new checking account, moving half of the funds from the old account to the new one. He then sent the direct deposit change form to his company's HR department. Later, he planned to update his direct payment accounts to reflect the new bank account. Afterwards, he visited their investment banker and ensured that all accounts and transfers would require both his and Sally's signatures. Brandon informed him that his lawyer, Lauren Taylor, would freeze these accounts the day after Sally was served. The pitying and concerned expressions from his longtime advisors were hard for Brandon to bear. He realized they were just the first of many acquaintances who would react the same way when they heard the news. The thought of telling his children about the divorce made him feel sick. Meanwhile, Sally tried to avoid Stephen Martinez at work as much as possible. At lunchtime, they met at Vivian's Cafe, a small restaurant he liked to call their place. Sally was quiet and refused to hold his hand. Despite Brandon's knowledge of their every move, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched all day. Stephen Martinez was completely unaware of Sally's mood. "I'm really looking forward to this weekend," he said. "The hotel check-in is at 3 p.m. Do you think we could meet a little earlier than planned? Maybe we could have some fun in the room before heading out for dinner." "I'm not sure," Sally replied quietly. Back at the office, Sally attempted to focus on her work, but her attention kept drifting. She realized that at least one, and probably several, of her colleagues were acting as informants for Brandon. After a few unproductive hours, she decided to call it a day and left the office. On her way out, she greeted the 2 new interns in her department. Pausing for a moment, she noticed the distinctive Central Logistics logo on the hoodie of one of them. Meanwhile, Brandon had finished all his tasks for the day. It was 2 p.m., and he realized he hadn't eaten anything yet. He decided to grab a quick bite at Vivian's Cafe. As he sat down, Vivian, the owner, came out and greeted him with a warm hug. Brandon returned the embrace and asked, "How's Derek doing?" "He's doing great," Vivian replied with a smile. "He made the baseball team as a walk-on. He's thrilled. You know, Jacob was a fantastic training partner for him this winter. Your son made a huge difference. Jacob is really looking forward to having his roommate on the team," Brandon said. Vivian joined Brandon at the table. They were in here for lunch again today, but things didn't seem quite right. Sally was very nervous, and Martinez, as usual, seemed clueless. "He might be clueless, but he's planning to spend the weekend with her," Brandon replied, his tone reflecting disappointment. "Don't lose hope just yet. She must be special for you two to have been married so long. She'll realize her mistake, hopefully sooner rather than later," Vivian reassured. "Now how about Maryland-style crab cakes with broccoli for you?" Brandon's face brightened for the first time that day. "Sounds perfect, and maybe a beer for a change. Surprise me with one of your pale ales." Meanwhile, Sally returned home early to put her backup plan into action. She intended to cook Brandon's favorite dinner and then try to talk with him again. It was crucial for him to agree to her proposal, or at least accept her decision. As the crab cakes baked, she changed into something nice, planning to meet Monica and her friend Layla for drinks, and a final discussion about her upcoming event on Saturday. She carefully stowed away the garment and Victoria's Secret bags in the trunk of her car. She didn't want to embarrass either herself or Brandon by bringing them out in front of him. Brandon arrived home at his usual time, greeted by the inviting aroma of dinner cooking. Sally emerged from the kitchen, offering him one of his favorite pale ales. "Take off your coat and tie and have a seat. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes," she said. Smiling at the sight of Maryland-style crab cakes and steamed broccoli, Brandon realized that despite his favorite meal being served, he would rather be dining at Vivian's Cafe. Anywhere but here in this moment. As they ate in silence, Sally made another attempt to explain why she needed this. "Brandon, I love you, and I hope you understand." Interrupting her, Brandon asked, "Are you going out tonight? You look really nice." Sally replied, "Yes, I'm meeting Monica and Layla for drinks later, but I love you and I hope." Yeah, I hope I understand." Brandon cut in, his tone cold. "I do understand." He pushed his plate away, suddenly losing his appetite. Standing up, he told Sally, "I've lost my appetite." As he walked away, he remarked to her, "You're all dolled up for him." "Ah, couldn't wait till tomorrow, I suppose. When you see Stephen Martinez tonight, tell him I said to drop dead." Brandon vanished into the living room, the TV's noise filling the dining room. Sally sat silently at the table, her head in her hands. For the first time, she seriously questioned her choices. After a few minutes, she rose and tidied the table. Now wasn't the time to hesitate. She had to stay true to her feelings. She messaged Monica, Can we meet earlier? I'm leaving in 5 minutes. Brandon heard the front door open and close. He sipped his beer, staring at the TV, realizing he'd been sitting there for 20 minutes without knowing the channel. A weight of sadness pressed on his chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. From his coat pocket, Brandon retrieved a box and swallowed 2 pills, washing them down with the last of his beer. It was the first time he'd taken sleeping pills, knowing he couldn't sleep without help. He also knew he'd need all his strength for Saturday morning. Sally arrived first at the bar and secured a table for the 3 of them. As she waited, she observed the scene at the bar. People engaging in a dance of seduction that to her seemed more like a dance of desperation and loneliness. Was this to be her fate? Her thoughts were interrupted by her friend's arrival. Sally watched as her 2 friends approached her table, noticing the determined looks on their faces. Layla sat down and fixed Sally with a stern gaze. What on earth do you think you're doing? Are you out of your mind? Cheating on your husband with some jerk from work? Have you lost your senses? Or have you started taking drugs? Or maybe you've hit your head. This has got to be the most foolish thing I've ever heard, and I used to think you were one of the smartest people I knew. If you go through with this, you'll be the biggest fool I've ever met. Sally responded to her friend with a simple, "Good evening to you too, Layla. I'm doing fine. How about you?" Yet she could sense the anger and hurt in Layla's eyes. Turning to Monica, Sally prompted, "Your turn." Monica shook her head. "You know where I stand on this adventure of yours. I'd say more, but I'm afraid I wouldn't be as polite as Layla was." Sally managed a sad smile. "You think you could curse better than Layla?" Monica's reply was serious. "Well, no one can curse better than Layla, but she left out words like or, cheater, adulteress, idiot, and maybe worst of all, disappointment. But there's something I need to tell you. I think you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. But I love you, and I'll be here to help you, no matter what you do." Layla shook her head. "Shit, Dan, what you want to do is so wrong and so stupid, but I'll be here for you too. Just to let you know, I'll be saying I told you so over and over." Sally embraced her friends warmly, expressing gratitude. "Thank you for your support. I understand you may not condone my actions, but it means a lot to know I have your support nonetheless. You both know I don't do things halfway. I've made a commitment, and it's time for me to see it through to its conclusion." Layla's voice was gentle as she pleaded, "Sally, there's nothing natural about cheating. Being committed to cheating is the opposite of true commitment." After a moment of silence, Sally rose from her seat, saying, "I need to finish my errands for tomorrow. I have a bottle of wine on its way." Finishing her tasks, Sally arrived at a darkened house. Collecting her thoughts, she sent Monica a lengthy text message, knowing her friend's anger, but also her willingness to help. Opening the trunk of her car, Sally realized the cold night would ruin her purchases if left inside. She decided to hide them in the hall closet downstairs. Returning to bed beside Brandon, she tried to sleep. Sleep eluded Sally that night. Finally, at 3 a.m., she rose and went downstairs. Spotting the wedding album on the coffee table, she decided to take a look. After just 2 pages, she closed the album and wept. She needed to make Brandon understand. At 5 a.m., she gave up on the idea of sleep and headed to the guest bathroom for a shower. After, she slipped into some lingerie from Victoria's Secret and then unpacked a beautiful garment from its back. Grabbing the suitcase she had prepared earlier, she took it out to the car, placing the Victoria's Secret bag beside it. Entering the kitchen, she quickly penned a short note to Brandon, amusing herself with the idea of leaving him a "Dear Brandon" letter. She left it on the coffee maker, switched off the lights, and made her way to the car, determined to see her plans through. Meanwhile, Brandon woke up at 6:15, noticing he was alone in bed. It struck him that she hadn't waited until tonight. He had pushed her into Stephen Martinez's arms. The image of her lying in Stephen Martinez's bed hit him hard. For the first time, he doubted himself. Should he have allowed her to have one night with another man? She had promised to be his alone after that. Had he sacrificed a lifetime of happiness for his ego and pride? As Brandon contemplated his situation, he came to the realization that he could never love her again if she chose Stephen Martinez. He had accepted her putting their children first, as any mother should, but he couldn't bear the thought of her prioritizing another man over him. Over 22 years, they had both earned each other's respect and loyalty. She would expect nothing less, and he wouldn't settle for anything less. Hoping she was still in the house, Brandon checked all the bedrooms, but found no sign of her return from last night. In the kitchen, he discovered a note on the coffee maker. With trembling hands, he opened it and read the short message, "Please understand." Collapsing into a kitchen chair, Brandon couldn't hold back his tears. He had dreaded this moment, but deep down, he had hoped she would stay, forget this foolish idea, and remain his wife. After starting a pot of coffee, he went upstairs, showered, and dressed quickly. Grabbing a duffel bag, he packed some clothes and headed downstairs. Brandon filled his travel mug and thermos with coffee before walking to the front door. With a heavy heart, he took one last look at the house that had been his home, switched off the lights, and closed the door behind him. The chilly morning air greeted him as he descended the steps. He had forgotten to warm up the car, but he figured the cold might help wake him up and shake off the melancholy he felt. As he strolled towards his car, he noticed that the engine was running. Opening the back door, he placed his bag inside and spotted the suitcase and Victoria's Secret bag on the back seat. Glancing over to the passenger seat, he saw Sally sound asleep. Closing the back door gently, he paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. Tears of joy welled up in his eyes at the sight of his wife, his love. He realized in that moment that they still had a chance. Brandon took a deep breath and opened his car door. As he settled into the driver's seat, Sally stirred and looked at him. "Good morning," she whispered softly, wiping her eyes. "Good morning," Brandon replied. After a brief pause, he asked, "How long have you been out here?" Sally checked the car clock and replied, "About 2 hours. I couldn't sleep, and then I got worried you might leave without me, so I decided to wait in the car. I filled up the tank and grabbed us a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts for the journey." Brandon opened the donut box and remarked, "There are only 7 donuts in here." Sally was fully awake now and replied, "The dozen was for both of us, and I've already had mine." With a smile, Brandon reached for one of the donuts, savoring its sweet taste as it melted in his mouth. "This should tide me over until we hit up the Virginia diner. How does country ham and creamed biscuits sound to you?" he asked Sally. Sally shook her head. "I'm not really dressed for the Virginia diner." Brandon looked puzzled. "Sally, the Virginia diner doesn't have a dress code. You can wear pretty much anything in there." Sally grinned. "I know you can wear pretty much anything, but you can't wear pretty much nothing." With that, she opened her coat to reveal a purple lingerie set to Brandon. "Well, that's pretty much nothing," Brandon chuckled. "Is that a new winter coat too?" "Yes, I exchanged that dress for this coat. Oh, and in case you didn't notice the Victoria's Secret bag, I returned the other lingerie and got these just for you," Sally replied. She gently lifted his chin with her hand, meeting his gaze. "This outfit and everything under it are for your eyes only, now and forever." After a brief pause, she continued, "I'm sorry for what I've put you through these past months. You were right about almost everything. There were only 2 things you got wrong. Last night, I dressed up just for you, and I did meet Monica and Layla. But the second thing you were wrong about was Stephen. He never entered our bedroom. I didn't close my eyes to think about him. But I couldn't look at you because I was so ashamed of what I wanted to do. I'm embarrassed to admit that the shame I felt didn't stop me from planning to be with someone else." She gazed at him and whispered, "I truly understand now." He kissed her gently and shifted the car into gear. There was much to discuss, a lot of work ahead to mend their marriage, but his heart swelled with joy as he realized she finally comprehended. As Brandon drove past the Virginia diner on Route 460, he glanced at Sally. She had dozed off shortly after they hit the highway. He hoped Monday wouldn't be spent undoing what he had done on Friday. They had a lot to talk about, and he knew any honest conversation would involve his confession. Brandon's mind wandered back to that evening 7 years ago. He was in San Francisco for the quarterly corporate meeting. At the time, he was a division head, and his risky move had paid off enormously for his company. While foreign companies were snapping up American competitors, Brandon saw an opportunity. He pushed for the acquisition of an Italian company with excellent engineers, but severe cash problems. His mentor, the CEO, approved the purchase, and it turned out to be a resounding success. The acquisition brought in several teams of seasoned engineers in the field where they were struggling. Not only did it open up access to the European market, but it also established a strong presence in China. The deal would ultimately be worth billions, marking the pinnacle of the CEO's career and propelling Brandon onto the corporate fast track. Sally was back home in Virginia, attending a school band concert with the boys that evening. Meanwhile, Brandon found himself celebrating his success with his coworkers, especially Kelly Robinson, a striking marketing representative from another division. Brandon and Kelly had cultivated a long-standing, friendly, flirting business relationship. Brandon had imbibed just enough to loosen his inhibitions, but not so much as to dampen his libido. They danced intimately, far closer than a married man should with someone other than his wife. Eventually, they headed to Kelly's room. In the elevator, they exchanged kisses and embraces, and as they stepped out, they hurried to her door. However, as Brandon reached the threshold, he suddenly froze, unable to take another step. It dawned on him that he physically couldn't bring himself to enter that room. His arousal had vanished. For the first time in hours, he thought of his wife and the wonderful family waiting for him at home. Despite Kelly's beauty, he couldn't find a single reason to go into her room. Backing away, he took 2 steps before breaking into a run back to the elevator. Once inside his own room, he quickly showered, eager to rid himself of Kelly's scent. At 1 a.m. in the Richmond home, Brandon felt the urge to hear Sally's voice. Despite the late hour, he called her. After several rings, Sally sleepily picked up the phone. Brandon assured her that everything was all right, and there was no cause for alarm. Then he shared the good news, his successful gamble, and the promotion with a significant raise. Tears welled up in his eyes as Sally, in her excitement, expressed how proud she was of him and how she always believed in his potential. She professed her love for him, and in that moment, Brandon realized he had almost shared this monumental moment with the wrong person. Sally's opinion and happiness meant everything to him. As Brandon drove towards the beach, he knew he had to tell her. He needed her to understand why he truly empathized with her feelings. He had been in her shoes before, which was why he could sincerely say, "I understand." Epilogue. Stephen Martinez found himself alone in Ryan Martin's office at Rivera & Sons. Ryan, the vice president of HR, had summoned him the moment he walked in that Monday morning. Stephen couldn't fathom why he was there. Sure, he had missed a couple of work deadlines recently, caught up in his pursuit of Sally, but he believed he could quickly catch up on his work. The meeting had thrown off his plans for the morning. He needed to have a conversation with Sally about what had occurred last weekend. Not only had she stood him up, but she had sent her 2 friends, Monica and Layla, to deliver the message. Stephen vividly remembered feeling intimidated by Layla. Despite his father's 25 years in the Navy, he couldn't match the sheer force of her profanity. She had publicly embarrassed him in the lobby of the Jefferson Hotel. Even the hotel security seemed hesitant to intervene. Stephen scanned the room until his gaze landed on a photo hanging on the wall. His feet carried him towards it, revealing Ryan Martin and another man posing proudly beside a citation-sized tuna. A sense of unease washed over him as he recognized the man beside Ryan. Though they'd never met, Stephen had seen his photo countless times on Sally Baker's desk. It was Brandon Baker. As he turned to return to his seat, his movement halted abruptly at the sight of a picture on Ryan Martin's desk. It was a family portrait, depicting Ryan with his 3 boys and a beaming wife. Now Stephen knew the last name of the woman who infernally lashed out at him, Layla Martin. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. He understood why he was here.